Perfect. So away we go.
All right, let's do this. Yeah, thank you everybody for coming today. Incredibly strange to see Sam put out his video and then Maria appears. Anyhow, so nice to meet you. I'm Kaspar. I am doing a lot of platform engineering. Happy to chat with you today. And we have a little bit of a provocative title here. Backstage is not your platform. Let me make one thing clear. I'm actually a Backstage fan. Like there's nothing wrong with Backstage. I'm just I think the number one point that I want to drive home today is that you have to treat Backstage as what it is, and that is a front end for a platform. And I just want to explore this a little bit more and look at this from different perspectives and see how we can help you with a little guidance on how to design good platforms. And I'm seeing an incredible amount of platforms, which is the biggest privilege in my job, to be honest. This is so interesting to look behind so many curtains and see what's happening in different platform teams. We're currently I just got that statistic, starting a new platform engineering initiative with a team with more than 500 developers every 3 days. And that's fantastic because you can see so many success stories and failure stories. And so we are, again and again and again, really wanting to share these insights. This is not about specific products. You could probably replace the name Backstage with pretty much any other portal. And that holds true for any other product that we are talking about today. All right, so what is Backstage? Just for the beginners here, those are the Backstreet Boys. I really want to make sure that at the next Platform Con we have a little show on the live days where we. But Backstage is a open source framework for building portals. And it is specifically focused on scaffolding functionality, on building dashboards, on having a service catalog. It's, if you want, a display layer for a platform. And it's really, if you look at just the usage, it's pretty crazy to see. I think it's one of the fastest growing CNCF projects, and it has this Backstage, it has this plugin architecture, which I actually like a lot, where they are able to, everybody can offer their different things, and you can then piecemeal them together, add new stuff in. So that's really good because it makes it pretty, you can fine tune it pretty well. There are several hosted options of Backstage. The best one, in my opinion, is Red Hat Developer Hub, because they have a really nice way also to giving back to the community and being upstream compatible. And they do a lot of good things there. But yeah, the open source project, it depends a little bit, from the pure architectural perspective, that's all good. It does require a fair amount of people to keep running. So just, as an introductory perspective on this, I would say 1 or 2 people are occupied. If you run this at larger scale, maybe a few more if you really have very large platforms. Yeah, so that's Backstage. Now, if Gartner is talking about the trough of disillusionment that will hit us somewhere in the life cycle, which is, everybody's hyped about platforms now and happy and life is good and we're all hugging each other and have warm, cushy feelings. But there is going to be the time, and I presume it's going to be somewhere in 25, where we are hitting that trough of disillusionment. And if I would need to forecast why we are hitting this, then I would say it is because a good amount of organizations are, I think you can call it, abusing Backstage and trying to use it for something that it's probably not meant for. I would say at the moment, around 60% of the platform engineering initiatives are using Backstage. And that's becoming a pretty considerable amount. So our internal assessment is that last year, maybe 600 actual platform engineering initiatives at larger scale were out there. We think that this has probably tripled this year. So we're looking at 1,500, 2,000. And if you look at just the activity on the Backstage project, you'll see that there is a lot of pressure behind this. The most impressive failure story for me is Netflix. And I like to use that example, first of all, because they've been displaying that very publicly. I'm not sure they intended to, but they did. And then second, because everybody's taking that as the example of the poster child for platform engineering with paved roads, etc. Now, in 2012, one of their principals was, bursting with euphoria and said, like, we are building that experience platform and life is good. We're unifying the Netflix engineering experience in a federated platform console. And they invested a huge amount of time into this. And then in year 2, and you don't need to take my word for it, you can just watch the video. They spoke again at PlatformCon in 23, and the key statement was the view and assess experience provides value, but on its own is not yet compelling enough to pull users in away from existing habits and routines. And that's a really interesting statement because it's a polite way of saying we've built this incredible thing, we've invested a lot of money, but nobody's really using it. And that's the problem with a lot of the setups. If I would need to cluster the problems, it's number 1, adoption rates aren't high enough. Number 2, it becomes hard to maintain, and we are trying to stuff too much into that layer. And what I want to explore with you is that we cannot over-index of what a single component of a platform can deliver. A good platform is the sum of all the tech and tools that platform engineers put together into a golden path that allows us to build these developer experiences, lowering cognitive load and doing that for all different user personas. Now, I have invented a little game. I still really want to program that, and that's called infrastructure tetris. And that I think is a good way of explaining what's going wrong with what will push us into the trough of disillusionment. And infrastructure tetris means you have that scaffold button in Backstage, and you have a lot of developers that are pushing this button, and then you have a bucket with all your resources, and you always push this button and you create more and more and more and more and more resources, and it's a super fun thing and developers enjoy it. Unfortunately, it's not super appealing to infrastructure and operation teams because somebody has to go into those uncomfortable buckets and make sure they're maintained and make sure they're, everything runs well and you don't have any security vulnerabilities. And in short, what that actually means is it's okay if you have a front end where you could do things and display this and looks nice, but this is really very much focused on the day 1 operation where we have to make sure that we actually deal with the stuff that's happening down the line. And we can't really kick the can down the street. We have to think about the future when we're designing these systems. And there's a little bit of a different way where we can look at this as well. And we call that the pain to impact pyramid. Now, if we're talking about platform engineering, we're very often talking about the pain points of the developer, right? So things like missing self-service, cognitive load, waiting times, we generally feel slow, all of that. But what that actually misses or forgets is that there are more personas in the picture. There are the infrastructure and operation teams, as an example, and they have also problems. They have ticket ops and low sanitization, manual reviews and insecure configurations, and cost spiraling, and the CFO calls them and is angry because they can't attribute cost to applications. And this is really just one example. You could also just replace this with security. Security is actually one of those user groups that does not get enough airtime if we talk about platform engineering. There's so many security teams out there that review plain Terraform, and I'm not sure why they're not revolting. I think their lobby is just not strong enough, well, for whatever reason. Now, the thing that I want to say is that we cannot optimize the experience of one group at the expense of the other. It is a multiplayer game. Now, I believe that there are really two key value drivers in platform engineering. One is automation, and the other one is standardization. And I believe, and we're deviating just a little bit from the core topic here, that you should have different personas that personify, that are essentially the heralds or the ambassadors of respective teams. So you should have infrastructure platform engineers talking for the infra and ops teams. You should have DevX platform engineers talk to for or in the name of the developers. All together, we need to serve the common goal of the organization. I just want to make that sort of clear, but because we often in the euphoria for great technology, we forget that. And that's about bringing time to market and cost down and innovation up. So key point here, the architectural designs of the platforms have to be multiplayer. How do we do this? If we are looking at, we want to drive automation and standardization, and the more we do this, the higher our return of investment. I always like to start by looking at what I don't think is a high degree of automation. And that's, in other words, a low degree of automation. You guessed it. Now, I like to take the example of a very specific golden path, if you want. You are a user, let's say a developer, and you have an existing workload, and you need a Redis for that workload. Now, why am I using that example? I could just use the standard example. We want to scaffold a new microservice. I'm deliberately not using that because scaffolding something that's new is pretty easy because we have no history. We have no existing dependencies. We can just start from a greenfield. But the reality isn't greenfield. Well, the world is not greenfield. The world is a very dirty brownfield. And that's why this is the more interesting case to look at. You have a workload already. You now want to add a Redis for that workload. Now, in the vast majority of cases, I see people saying, okay, we'll use our CI pipeline, and then we're going to have a Terraform, and we're going to create that Redis, and we have a template, everybody's happy. And that's okay, but that's only 10%. That means that there are still a lot of manual actions because you now need to fold that into the existing architecture. You need to change the application configurations, and you need to check the policies, and then there is a sign off, and somebody reviews this, and you need to inject the secrets, and you need to do this for all the different environments. And you want to be in a world where you say, okay, the user expresses something, and boom, we have all of that automatically done. And that is by default really, really difficult if you think about the platform just from I have a display layer, that display layer calls one API. There is an interesting correlation. If all you need to do is one API call that does one execution, you could also do that by simply going into the GitHub template engine and do that yourself. That's not really automating and creating a high return on investment. And if you look at if you just take the front end layer, if you just take this the backstage, and you use the scaffolding button, what happens is that it's going to go to the Google GitHub template API. It's going to clone that, and then it's just going to run a pipeline. Now, the second thing here is the standardization, and that counts into that picture that we saw around the infrastructure tetris. The world we live in right now is a world where every time we press that button, we create yet another Postgres or configuration. And let's say we just look at Postgres in staging. Yeah, every time I click that button, I get another Postgres in staging. Now, for that one beautiful moment in time that we should all cherish, for that first moment, that configuration follows the global standard. But from there are developers and operations people and security people going through manual files and changing things, and they're just drifting apart, and that increases the surface area of what you need to maintain. And so we want to live in a world where we have a high degree of standardization. all Postgres databases of a certain type should all look the same. And I'm saying all of these things because it helps you understand that if we think about architectural design and if we say, hey, just having a display layer is enough, then that's a huge fallacy because there are a lot of other things that we have to take into consideration. And the biggest point here is that in order to realize the above, then you need to really make sure that you don't only think about the front end, but you think about this as an architecture, a platform architecture. Now, here we go. This is a platform architecture. On platformengineering.org/something, we can link this. There is like a tooling, and then there are all the different platform talks that are displaying different reference architecture types. This is just one example here. We have this. This was first proposed by McKinsey in a Medium article and a platform talk to have that differentiation into control planes. And what I find so important is that if you think about architectural design, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. And we have to realize that platform architecture is a lot like software architecture. And if we apply software architecture principles, then it becomes pretty obvious that if you have a front end and a portal is a front end, you need that, and it's a good and important component, but we cannot stuff too much logic into it because otherwise that becomes unmaintainable, and we have to treat it as what it is, and that is a display component. Now that means if you have a front end, you have a back end. There are different ways how we can design that backend. I'm going to show you two. And that also means, and that's in my mind important, if we look at the front end, we have to make sure that we give the user interface choice. So if we think a moment back of what the Netflix dilemma was, Brian Leatham says we were not yet able to get developers away from their current workflows and into the new world. Now, to be concrete, the view and assess experience provides value, but on its own is not yet compelling enough to pull users in and away from existing habits and routines. And when I read this first, I thought, well, do we actually want to get users away from their current habits and routines? And if you ask me personally, I'm not sure it's our job to educate people or completely retrain them. I believe interfaces should be designed in a way where you meet the user where the user is. And now that means you probably want to have interface choice. And that means if you go to the developer and say, hey, here is a UI now, I want all of you to use that UI, you can say that, but they're not going to use it. Some will, some won't. For citizen developers, you might want to do that. For project managers, you might want to do this. For your executives, that might be great. For your hardcore backend engineers, not sure that will be great. So I'm a big advocate for not only displaying or giving them the UI, backstage, if you want, as a interface, but also a CLI, an API, and a code-based method. And in order for that, so if we look at the front-end layer, it's important that not even the front-end layer is only backstage. Even on the front-end layer, we probably have different options. Now then, as we design that, we have to make sure we take those things into consideration, that it's a multiplayer game. It needs to serve the developers, but it can't go at the expense of the backend and the infrastructure and operation teams. And you do that by doing intelligent, opaque abstractions and wherever possible reusability. And you design the backend in a way that it actually resumes life cycle management duty, if you want, for your resource. So rather than having infrastructure tetris, you click and then some humans have to take care of that, we design this in a way where you click, it's totally fine, you click on backstage, and I can show you a quick demo if you want later. And then once you've done that, the backend will automatically take the responsibility to then help you update this in fleet management, make sure it's tuned down if you don't need it anymore, make sure that it's scanned for vulnerabilities, etc. And that's why on the backend design, that's something that should not be an afterthought. I believe there is a big argument to be made that we should do the backend first and then put a front end on top. But however you do this, it is an absolutely vital component. Now, there are several ways of how to design backends. You can, of course, use the, let's say, historic way of doing that, and that would be pipeline-based backends with CI/CD and Terraform, and you piecemeal that together. That is possible, and it's actually, by the way, let me correct myself. I believe it's for certain setups the better approach, specifically for smaller setups. So if you have 20, 30, 40, 50 developers, I would probably opt for a pipeline-based setup, and then I wouldn't even put a front end on top, because you have short ways of communication. You don't have that many resources, and for that, pipelines work actually pretty well. The good thing as well is that pipelines, most people know them by now, right? Most people have used GitHub Actions and Jenkins and whatnot. The problem, if you scale and you need to actually maintain a large amount of different resources, then it becomes difficult. That's because pipelines have start-stop logic. They are linear, and they're optimized for environment progression, all of that. And the amount of code that you need to simulate that behavior of actually managing infrastructure end to end grows exponentially with the amount of resources. So I've not seen many cases where people were really able to generate a high return on investment at a larger scale north of 50 developers. And don't get me wrong, it's possible, but you need to throw full-time equivalents at it. You essentially need to solve the problem with human time. The thing is, if you design systems well, if you design architectures well, you want to detach the growth of the platform team from the growth of the application developer. So in other words, the more developers, the more resources, the lower the growth in the size of the platform team, because otherwise it's really hard to justify the expenditure for the organization. That's why I am a big fan of graph-based backends, so-called platform orchestrators. There are a growing number of options out there. A couple of years ago, I was sitting here and everybody said, like, of course, Kaspar is saying that because he, that's one of the products that he's building. That's not the case anymore. You have options. You have open source options, you have closed source options, and I am genuinely convinced it's the better approach. So how does that work? So here, that's actually a product that we've started, Score, and that's the core thing of Platform Orchestrators is that you now bring together an abstract description of the world with generalized rules. And we've just handed that over to the CNCF, which they've accepted last week. I'm super happy about that. So that's officially not a Humanitec product anymore, but that is handed over to the CNCF. So no dirty HashiCorp stunts from us. There's not going to be an open score in the future. There's just going to be Score, hopefully. And I think this is becoming a really well-rounded thing. The idea here is that you have a specification that describes in abstract terms the relationship between the workload and its dependent resources. It is what I call environment agnostic, which means you have one file that sits next to the workload source code, and it replaces all other app and infrastructure configurations, and is environment agnostic. Environment agnostic because you can send this to local, dev, staging, production, all with the same file. If we look at this, we have here a product service depending on a Postgres, S3, and DNS. So again, that abstract relationship between things. And that is one part. You have that separation of environment agnostic elements and the rules. Now, obviously, if you have that and you send that against any system, the system won't be able to do anything with it because it doesn't know how you want your Postgres and staging and all of that. And so you need to train the backend on those conventions. And that's what you're doing by using resource definitions. So a resource definition says, here, if you have a workload, if my workload has a Redis and I'm deploying to staging, then please use this parameterized Terraform file or Crossplane or Pulumi or call the Cloud API directly to update and create that resource. And now, if we actually play through this, that means the infrastructure and operation team set the rules. They say for staging and Postgres, use this. And if we have a ephemeral environment and we need DNS, then I want you to use Cloudflare, and workloads should have an OTel sidecar and whatever you want to put in there. And then developers send that abstract request, and that makes its way through the pipeline. And by the way, this abstract request, now it's Score, but this could just as well be a CLI, or this could just as well be Backstage, right? And that could essentially, and I believe it's really like a better way of than this Backstage YAML, because now the developer can use this, and the backend will shove the data back up to Backstage, make sure that this is always up to date. One of the big problems with Backstage designs without proper backends is that you never know whether you can trust the data, right? And now, not only do you have that file and you have accurate data, but also the user can say, hey, I want to use the UI because I'm a big fan of ClickOps, or hey, I want to use a code-based method because I like to stay in code and Visual Studio Code and whatever. And that's really important. So you send that abstract request through whatever way, and that hits the CI pipeline. The orchestrator is analyzing the context, and it's picking the right resource definition, and then it's generating a cyclic resource graph, a relationship graph between all of those different components, one graph for every environment and every deployment. Then, of course, the app and infrastructure configurations, etc., and then does the execution. Now let's play through this again. Let's say I'm a developer and I have that existing workload and I want to add a Redis. That's the example that we've been using previously. So now I add 2 lines of code and it sends through the CI pipeline again. I hit my orchestration component. I figure out what the right Redis definition is, and boom, I have my next graph, and now I have Redis. And let's say I'm an infrastructure and operation person and I now want to update all my Redis in staging. I do that in one place, and all graphs that consume this will update as well. Don't worry, obviously, there are progressive rollout scenarios here, etc. But that's really, really powerful, because now I have that high degree of automation, sophisticated automation, high degree of standardization, and everybody's happy. And then once we have that, we put the front end on top, and we never forget that a front end is a front end is a front end and is a front end. These things then give you the chance to build these golden paths, and you do that for all the different functions, not only for developers, also for infrastructure and operations, also for security teams. Give me an S3 bucket, give me an ephemeral environment, fleet update of resources, diffs of stuff, policy checks, and all of these things, no problem with a good backend. And now I'll do something that is... I'll do this super fast, but I thought it might be interesting that I just give you like a little demo of a Backstage thing here, Backstage instance in combination with a backend, and we're just going to we're going to stay in the version control and in Score and in Backstage. And so I'm not sure I've ever demoed in one of those webinars, but we're just going to do it because it's fun. So we are going to open Backstage here. And yeah, so this is Backstage. Ta-da, here we go. And we have our create thing here up here, and that's our templating catalog, where you set the templates. If we look at our little architecture that we saw earlier here, then the templates are application source code templates. And so we have that differentiation now. Application source code holds the abstract description and the workload source code, and platform source code holds your infrastructure as code and those resource definitions, the general conventions on how things relate to each other. So I'll go ahead as a developer now. I am a developer. And I am going to scaffold the first service. And I'm doing a little bit of the opposite of what I just said, because now I'm going to show you something that's, yeah, and I'm always using names of little towns around me. This one is going to call Metzeltin. Nice. 100 inhabitants, beautiful village. So we hit create here, and now let's have a look at the logs. Backstage, it's doing its magic, so it's going in and it's going to it's been cloning this, and then the CI pipeline was running, and then an orchestrator ran, and then the orchestration is analyzing the score file. So now let's look at the repository that we've created, and I'm just going to move this over here because here I'm authenticated. And we have our workload service code. Everybody's happy. We look at the score file here. The score file tells me I'm a service called Metzeltin, and I am the most trivial of services because I just need a DNS and I need a route. So far, so trivial, to be honest. Everything that I showed you right now, you can absolutely do with GitHub Actions in Terraform. Nothing about this here is special. And now, in a couple seconds, Backstage will receive the information from the backend. We can look in the catalog, and it will show that here there's a development environment being spun up. And I think in this case, we're going to create a base environment and a namespace, and the DNS is going to be configured, and all of these wonderful things happen. This will be done by the orchestration. And then once the orchestration is done, because it's API-based, it's going to shove everything up back to the Backstage here. And now it's succeeded, and we have our workload running, and we have a DNS, and we can look at that. And then we have a little service, hopefully, and we can ping that service, and life is good. All right, honestly, still so far so trivial. So let's say I'm a developer. I've been developing the service for a while, and now I really want a Redis. And unfortunately, bad luck, my development environment is blocked because I have my colleagues are busy deploying, and but I really want to get this Redis out. So how do I do this? Pretty straightforward. I'm going to go here to edit this file. Obviously, you won't do that in your version control. You'll do that in your IDE. And we're going to say, give me cache of type Redis. Okay, and we're going to commit the changes. And unfortunately, I mean, as I told you, the main branch is blocked. So what to do? And so I think you should create a new branch, and we're going to propose the change. And here we go, create pull request. And now what this is going to do is that it's going to reach out to the CI is running, and then at the PR, it's calling the orchestrator, and it goes, hey, orchestration, I need Redis. Also, development is blocked. Let's spin up a new environment. And because we still have that score file and that abstract request, we will essentially then the orchestration will say, okay, well, I'm giving you a PR environment that looks exactly like the development environment looked. But by the way, you changed the Redis, you added that to the score file. So I'm also going to give you a Redis. And then once all of this is done, I'm going to signal back to Backstage, and I'm going to make sure that you can see that there. Now, while this is working in the background, and we can see, so PR1 is already loading and in progress. While this is working, let's do a quick detour and figure out how does the system know how you want your Redis to look like. And that's, as I said, through resource definition. Everything is code in, code out. And this is how a resource definition looks like. And it says, hey, if you have a Redis and we're deploying to production, then I want you to use this parameterized Terraform. And if we look into the Terraform, then we'll see that this is a really normal Terraform. But it could also be crossplane, or it could also be any other infrastructure as code file. Or again, we could use a little driver service to call the cloud APIs, or on-prem, by the way, automatically. Okay, so now we're done, and we can look at this here. We can just stay in Git, or we look at the UI. Again, this is so important. Don't force the user to look at the front end. If they want to look at the front end, let's go. We have the PR environment now. We have the service. Now it has an external cache. And so that's great. But if the user doesn't want to look at that and you don't want to break their workflow, you can just as well display that here in the CI, and we can look at the new service, and we can ping, and we can feel the excitement of a demo that actually works. We can look at the diffs. We could look at what resources are actually being used. And we can see here that those things are now all running. Here's my Redis. I have DNS. Life is good. We can actually see the resource graph. That's nice. That's new. And we can actually display that probably. Okay, cool. We're done. And now we say, hey, we're good. Let's merge the pull request back. We'll confirm the merge here. And then the CI will again go to the orchestration and say like, hey, orchestration, thank you so much for helping, but we don't need this anymore. Can you please tear down my PR1 and then bring that Redis into the development environment? And that's then actually going to happen. And it's going to, in a couple of seconds, delete PR1, which is exactly what just happened, and fold that back into the development environment. And then we are done. That's probably, we'll still have to reload, but in a couple of seconds, it will then have our cache in this development environment. All right, so what have we learned today? I hope, at least, that I was able to transfer the information that I believe you should think about Backstage as a good front end for a platform. But a platform is the sum of all of the different things. If you are designing platforms, you have to have many different users and personas in mind. The developers play a role, the infrastructure and operation teams play a role, the security teams play a role, your product managers play a role, your executives play a role. It's a multiplayer game. If you do that, you need to make sure that you also really think about how do you reach a degree of automation that goes beyond calling a single API endpoint and then one thing gets executed. A high degree of automation leads to a high degree of return on investment. And you want to let the back end of a platform really be responsible for maintaining the lifecycle of a resource, because only in that way you avoid infrastructure tetris. Yeah, so that would be my final statement here. And now I would be happy to take questions or disagreement or whatever you feel like today.
So a reminder for everyone, if you have any questions, you can ask them in the Q&A feature or just ask them in the chat directly. I'll read them out for Kaspar, just so that people on YouTube can hear what the question is as well, since they can't see them in the chat. So the first question we've got, I see similarities in Score to DBT. Would it be possible to extend it to generate relevant documentation like DBT?
Yes, that should be possible. And I really think that now with this being a CNCF project, I mean, we have contributions like we have Bechtle, for instance, contributing like a one person that's working on this phenomenal, and we have a couple others. So that's great, but that's really something. Those code-based interfaces, be it Score, be it something else, is really something that we all have to work on together. So you should really work on this. We can collaborate on this. There are like I think bi-weekly or monthly Score community meetings. There is a community in Slack, so I would really invite you to participate there.
Yeah, so I think you can go search up Score, and there's a lot of good conversations happening around that. So you could join in, EJ. So the next question in the chat is, whatever is demonstrated is being currently used on prod? Question mark.
Yeah. At large scale with organizations and brands that I think you use every day several times. So this is long beyond pet stage. It's yeah.
Very cool. So the next question, actually one point on that as well. If you're interested in more stuff specifically on that topic, Satish, we have quite a few good talks from PlatformCon using Score, showing Score and a few real world examples, going into a bit more detail than we were able to cover here. So you can go take a look at some stuff like that. There's a lot of more stuff out there. So a few questions from Sarai Patel. So thank you, Sarai. You're very active. The first one, does Humanitec do in-office or virtual talks with platform engineering concepts?
No. So we do. I mean, it's important to understand that Humanitec doesn't equal, the other community stuff, right? There's different groups. Humanitec itself obviously has a service team that you can do talks. From the platform engineering community side, we will try to do a lot more in-person stuff. So we've done in-person events in several cities. We're going to do more roundtables. I'm going to speak in an intimidating amount of cities this year. My wife is super excited. So that's definitely happening. And we are going to make this more in person. Also, what's fantastic to see is that more and more of the local communities, of which there are north of 30 at this point, are being more active and becoming more active. There was a big gathering in Japan last week, for instance. Yeah, if you want to have specific in-person content around products from Humanitec, you need to reach out to Humanitec and talk to the service groups.
And irrespective of the Humanitec part, I think we have weekly webinars in the platform engineering community. There's lots of content on PlatformCon, and the platform engineering Slack and blog are a great place for content there. So if you're more focused on core platform engineering concepts as a whole, we've got about 80 plus hours from PlatformCon of content that you can go through, and I think that will be a great way to go. There's courses as well. So from the platform engineering community, I think a lot of what you're looking for there might be covered. So on to the next question. How do you tackle culture and adoption when it comes to building out an IDP? We have strong DevOps processes. However, our platform and SRE functions require improvements.
That's a great question. So my recommendation there is always to start way, way smaller than you could possibly imagine. And to, this is a little controversial. I don't think you should go out and ask your developers what they want. Not initially. You should 100% do that and treat that as a product. Don't get me wrong. But the first thing cannot really be go out and ask people, because you can't ask people whether they want an iPhone if they've never seen one, right? And so our recommendation is always to build that first version, build that minimum viable platform, and do that within 4 to 8 weeks. You can Google reference architectures for internal developer platforms. There are like dozens out there. So you can really get started pretty quickly. And then once you have that first iPhone, you go to different groups. You go to operations, you go to security, you go to developers. It's like, hey, how do you like this? And then you ask them what they think about it and how to improve this. And after you've done that, you choose one team that's excited. And you should take a little time choosing the right team. You can make a lot of mistakes there. The right team is a team that is not too advanced. Don't fall for the fallacy of taking the team that is the best in Terraform, the best in Helm charts, the best at everything. Because these people, you're not able to reach the degree of maturity that they're expecting from the platform. You'll be there in 1.5 years, but you're not there now. Mm-hmm. So choose a team that is maybe at the beginning curve of adopting something new. I love to work with teams that are just starting to adopt Kubernetes, for instance. They're often overwhelmed and they're happy if you help them. Choose that team and then focus all your attention of adjusting the MVP and make it ideal for that team. You want to build something that is 10 times better than what this team has been using so far. Go as far as taking their application and bringing it on their platform, on your platform yourself. Don't make the hurdle of using this. That first user is really the epiphanic moment for you. Make that as simple and as obvious as possible. Mm-hmm. Tell your managers early on that you're over-investing in that one team, so that you're going to do incremental steps. It's not going to cost you much. We are going to focus on this. We are going to make this one thing really well. And then you're starting to slowly add teams, and you'll see that they're coming themselves. And even then, you want to make sure that you take statistical siblings of the first team and you do things slowly and step by step. And if you do that, you can do the technical and cultural transformation by creating a pull rather than by pushing this onto users. And that's really the trick.
Kaspar is clearly too humble to mention it, but he also has a great PlatformCon talk on this topic. I would recommend you take a look at as well. We have a lot of very cool PlatformCon stuff. I had to watch every single one of them as I help organize the community. So there's a lot of good stuff in there. And on adoption, on culture, there's some great content there I'd recommend. So the next question is in regards to your demo. Is it possible to open source demos or workshops for people to play around with? Being able to fork and build, break things would be very useful.
Yeah. So this demo concretely is open source, or you can use this with all the free trials of those products. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to open source GitHub for you, but that is possible. My colleague Clemens today has launched an IDP in the box. It's really funny. You're using your local machine. You treat this as a data center, and it has all sorts of things: observability, cost control, and all of this is open source. And we are going to link that in the email that we sent as a follow-up.
Yeah, and there'll also be a workshop session on that as well. So I would stay tuned for that if that's something you're interested in. So the next question is from Pete. So thank you, Pete. Great presentation, Kaspar. Do you have any thoughts on the security implications of using platform orchestrators versus traditional approaches?
I do. Orchestrators are significantly more secure because they are reducing human error. You do not have configurations that somebody, by default, if you do this, set this up well, you don't have a situation where people go into an Amazon console and click some buttons, or you can make sure that this is you can override this. So actually, 60% of the organizations we work with are either financial or government, because of that idea of introducing security by default. You can go a step further, and you can let the orchestration generate the acyclic resource graph and the final app and infrastructure configurations, and then build a power balance, if you want, where you introduce another system that mistrusts the orchestration. So, for instance, a policy checking mechanism. So the orchestrator says, like, I've created the final configurations, sends them to a policy checking mechanism, check off, for instance, the policy checking mechanism says, okay, I've policy checked them, that's fine. And then you proceed with the actual deployment, or you block that. And so that's where you can design that very, very securely.
Makes perfect sense. And then a question from Daniel, which I think we covered already. Is there going to be an open source version of Platform Orchestrator soon?
So we are not going to open source our own orchestration, just because at some point we also need to pay the wages for all our colleagues. But we are there's a new marketplace actually for open source components, and we've open sourced most. There will be open source products for orchestrators, and if you look around, you'll probably already identify some.
Yeah, if you look on the platform engineering landscape, there's a few open source platform orchestrators already, and there are platform, kind of things that are suitable open source wise. Bit different, of course, but we actually have a session in the works which is around building an entire IDP using only open source stuff. So stay tuned in the community for something like that, and bits and pieces of building your blend. So there's your answer.
Nice.
Next question is from Jeremy. Thank you so much. This was a great webinar and an amazing demo.
Thank
very
you.
positive feedback today in the chat. So thank you all very much.
Very kind.
Any tips for how to guide organizations away from just slapping Backstage into their platform to check the platform engineering box? Perfect question.
Is a good question. It is a great question. I mean, look, I would be, in the end, it comes down of by how people have to be accountable for driving return on investment. I mean, I would love to live in a world. I would essentially love to live in communism if it would work, right? Unfortunately, it doesn't. Um, and that for me translated into platform engineering means these initiatives, if they're not able to show return on investment, don't really should not really exist. And in the long run, and the long run is 24 months, they will be killed if these people cannot show the return on investment. And I like to ask them, like, can you give me concretely, not vaguely, concrete, and like even only a calculation how this is supposed to make sense? And now I always like to use the following calculation. What is it concretely in the developer workflow that you're optimizing? And then in 90% of cases, they say the scaffolding of a new microservice. And you say, okay, how long does the scaffolding of a new microservice take right now? And assuming that we have templates in GitHub template. And they'll say, you know, if we have templates in GitHub template, it would take 10 minutes to execute that. And then you say, okay, now we have Backstage on top, just Backstage. And that takes 2 full-time equivalents to deal with. So we're looking at something between, depending on where you are located, 250 to 400,000 cost of ownership of running and customizing and dealing with Backstage at scale, right? We have to take that into consideration. I mean, like, I'm a big fan of open source. We're heavily investing in open source, but open source isn't free. Open source means you have the thing and somebody developed that, and then you are taking care of it. So total cost of ownership for Backstage, let's be realistic. You're in the US West Coast or wherever, you're going to pay 400K. And so then you say, okay, how many developers do we have? 100. Okay, so now they're clicking here, and then it's calling the GitHub template API. Let's say we save 10 minutes. Let's be really generous and say we save 10 minutes versus doing it through GitHub directly. Now, do the calculation. How often do they have to click to build a new service in order to justify 400,000? And how many services are we scaffolding every year? So you need to push for hard facts, and you need to break the perception of people that, you know, it's enough if we do this, you know, by visualizing. Lee King, who is a fantastic platform engineer, wrote an article that I like a lot. If you put a pane of glass on a pile of shit, you still see a pile of shit. And that's very, very true. And by making that absolutely crystal clear, and being the voice of reason, you can do that. And there's always the option to send angry videos of me talking about this, because the internet is full of them.
We have plenty of those flying around the platform engineering community. There's also quite a few platform con talks on this exact topic, and some good blogs as well. So I think you can come at a very multifaceted approach. I'd also, if you're looking for kind of personal stories on this is a topic that people in the platform engineering community on Slack have talked about a lot. There are a lot of threads detailing people's failures, for the most part, misdreams, annoyance with bosses who've told them that this is what they have to do. So I think if you're looking for some proof in there, that's a good place to go.
And I have one more thing. Many people have problems with bosses consuming Gartner content. And the trick is that there is more to Gartner in the platform engineering hype cycle. There's the platform engineering hype cycle, and there are conversations about internal developer platforms, but make sure that they consume the content on infrastructure platform engineers. That's really important. Those are two, like, you need to understand how Gartner works. They have two different, like, there are several different groups of analysts, and they do talk to each other, but not always. And so you want to make sure that they really look at both parts of the medal.
Totally. So next question is from Pete. What does extensibility look like for Score? Am I going to be writing my own extensions, or is there a healthy ecosystem of integrations yet?
So Score uses implementations. Implementations are essentially services that take the Score file, interpret it, and transform it. And there is a good one for Score Compose that was just recently redone a month ago or something for local conversion. There's a very good one for Score Kubernetes. And in the works are things for serverless transformations and all of that. So the optimally supported at the moment is the Kubernetes ecosystem. If you have specific things that you would like to see, make sure that you really go into the Score Slack and raise your voice.
Thank you very much. So I think we have time. You can squeeze in just, we've got more questions coming in. I think we only have time to just squeeze in just one more, I think. But it's been in the chat here for a while, so I'll get to it. What kind of profiles need to be in the platform team? Is it DevOps, SREs, Kubernetes experts, IAC experts, observability experts, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I think that the important thing is the mix. We have a internal way of, if somebody comes to us, if we work with them, then if they, for instance, have a platform owner, like a product owner for the platform, the chances of them being around after 12 months doubles. So I think that's a really, really important persona. Then, of course, you want to have an IAC and Kubernetes person, and you want to have somebody from the developer experience side, former developer looking at this, giving somebody who is probably has been there, looked at this, and then has really felt the pain and can be the spokesperson for the developers. I think it's important that you work with people that have seen the scale you're working at. I think that's a really, really important point. If you are a team of 50 developers, your platform engineers should have the experience for teams of 50 developers. If you are a team of 500 developers, you should have people with the experience of teams in the range of 500 developers. Because what holds true for a team of 50 developers does not need to hold true for a team of 500 developers. And there are a lot of agile coaches at the moment on LinkedIn being funny about bashing team topologies. And, I'm also like a big fan of clickbait. But these people always give me the impression that they've not seen scale, because there are certain things, if you have 1,000 developers and you're in a security critical environment, you wouldn't even consider doing. Like, it's like you look at their proposals and go like, I mean, come on, we will not allow people deploying a new database to production or giving them, unregistered access to an Amazon console for a banking service. It's not going to happen. So I think it's so important that you really have the right horse for the right cause there.
Totally. And I know I said just one more, but we've just got one last one left, and it's a very quick one, I think, for you.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Once you give developers interface choice through an orchestrator, is Backstage still the right fit for the front end?
Yeah, I mean, you need to make sure. I mean, again, the developers are only one group. The executives are an important group, and the project managers are a very important group as well. And although you will not see developers use your UI once a day, they will use your platform several times a day, right? Otherwise, you should probably build it. But they won't use it more than once a month for debugging or whatever. But for your executives, it's of course relevant to see things, because very often they lack the technical detail, and seeing things makes them feel happy. And that's a little strange, right? But you want people to be happy, and you want people to see something, and you want people to be proud of what you've built. And that's more tangible in a user interface than it is in a code or API. That makes me happy, it makes you happy, but it doesn't need to make every persona happy.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So we've gone a little bit over. So sorry about that, everyone, but I just wanted to close off these last few questions. A huge thank you to you, Kaspar, for this. I think it was super helpful for everyone. And just a reminder that you can find the recording for this webinar on the Platform Engineering YouTube channel, and we'll be sending you a follow-up email with Kaspar's slides. And if you have any questions or anything like that, you can feel free to reach out to Kaspar on Slack in the Platform Engineering community, ask any follow-up questions or share your thoughts, and I'm sure he'll be happy to oblige. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and thank you.